said, I do think it's important to understand the distinction about what level of technical involvement you should have as a PM. Just because think about it this way, the more that I ask my engineering team about technical questions or keep bothering them about these questions, the less time they have to do
Yes.
the work that we're
Yes.
telling them to do.
Welcome to this episode of The Breakdown, a podcast for all things product, entrepreneurship, and everything in between. For this episode, we're breaking down the experience of Pranathi Alla, Senior PM Specialist from Salesforce, also a PM alumni who graduated from the Software Management Program. She worked as a software engineer at VMware for 3 years, before coming into CMU to further develop her PM skill set. Without further ado, let's dive into this episode of The Breakdown.
Okay. Hello, audience. So we are pretty honored to have Pranathi Alla as our this episode speaker. So hello, do you want to have a brief introduction to our audience?
Sure. Thank you, Tilly. Hi, everyone. My name is Pranathi. I am a recent graduate from Carnegie Mellon University from the Silicon Valley campus. I was a part of the CMU's software management program. I graduated last December. And since then, I've been working in Salesforce as a senior product manager, specialist in security. A little bit about me. I'm from India. I've worked there for a couple of years as a software engineer in VMware. And I did my undergrad in computer science. And I recognized that I needed a couple of skill sets. And I did my master's in product management, specifically in the software management course. And here I am.
Yes. Yeah, I actually know Pranathi from the offline for a pretty long time. It seems like Pranathi's PM trajectory was really curated ahead of the time because like she was basically from engineering background and then come to CMU to be my schoolmate and we become alumni like most recently. And she was got into a very handful US PM educational program, which is called Master of Software Management. So I kind of find interesting, like, how did you figure out you want to transfer from an engineer to a product manager? And like, how did you figure this out? And do you like really plan this out ahead of time? Or you were just like exploring on the way?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So the first time that I've gotten an understanding that, product management is what I wanted to do was during COVID. I actually had the opportunity to apply to this incubator program in one of the top colleges, MBA colleges in India. It's called ISB, Indian School of Business. They ran an incubator program that I applied for and got selected. And as a part of that, I got to work on my own idea, think about how that product would look like, and really think about the customer pain points. So I was thinking about, would this require a technical solution in the first place? What would the customer look to have? So when I started thinking about this from the lens of a customer, rather than how to implement the solution, which was what I was doing as an engineer, it was a huge paradigm shift for me. And as an engineer, I was working in a silo and thinking like this was something that I absolutely loved. And I didn't look back. So I knew that I wanted to pursue product management, but I also knew there was a gap in my skill set. So I formally pursued that.
Yes. So interesting because I kind of like talk with you before. So I know you already got into some like PM jobs and trying to play as a pseudo PM in your engineering work, and also that you move into a official educational program. So what do you think is the differences between the educational program and the very practical experience inside the company? And how do you think that's contributes your trajectory of the transition from an engineer to a product manager?
Sure. Yeah. When I was doing my undergrad in computer science, what I've learned versus what I do as a developer in VMware was very different. So I was very cognizant of the fact that what you learn versus what you do isn't always going to be one-to-one mapping. And so what I tried to do is once I initially began to form an interest in product management, I thought to myself, I need to figure out whether I really like this or it's just the feeling that I've gotten through theoretical knowledge. So I volunteered to work. The way I did that is, and I recommend anybody interested in breaking into product management in a different domain do this as well, is if you're working in a company, try to transition internally just to get an understanding and feel of how that work would look like. Within VMware, since it was a large company, there were a lot of rules in place in order for me to shift into product management. So what I could do within that realm was volunteer for a project that was happening in VMware. It was a COVID portal that we were creating internally. So I volunteered for that to be a product manager. And I really enjoyed the work that we were doing, being able to create a roadmap for what this product would look like, talking to customers and asking, hey, does this look like something you would use? Is this easy for you to use? Because this was in an environment where they needed to access information as quickly as possible and as easily as possible. They shouldn't have to work too hard to do this. So we were running user tests and validation tests to understand whether or not what we're doing was right. So I got to experience what being a product manager would look like in a very large environment, like a big corporate environment like VMware. And what I did also after that was I volunteered pro bono in a startup. So that gave me a completely different perspective working in a nascent company with like a lot of volatile changes. So I felt like I've gotten to experience what the practical product management space would look like in the corporate space. And I really liked the work that I was doing, not just whatever I was learning. So I recognized that, okay, you know what, this is what I like, but I clearly don't know enough. So I just jumped into honing my skills.
Okay, interesting. But like I also, yeah, I have a follow-up question here. It's like seems like you already get involved in the PM job, like jobs in the no matter in the startup or in the
Right.
large corporate. So why do you all like still choose to come to CMU to finish a master degree? Because seems like a lot of people also do the internal transfer from an engineer to a PM. So like what did did you make you to make the decision to come to CMU? And do you recommend people and students to go to your program?
Right. So I think it depends on a case by case basis. I know that sounds like a cop out, but what I mean by that is I recognize that there are multiple ways for me to have become a PM. The reason why I chose to do a master's program is because, like I was saying, I had the opportunity to work hands on different projects and be a PM for them. While I was doing that, of course, I didn't know anything about being a PM. So I was researching, I was Googling, I was looking for templates online on how to create a PRD. I was doing all of that, and the internet is a wonderful resource. But I think what I was looking for was just building that ground level knowledge on, why we do certain things. Why do we need only these components in a PRD? Don't we and I could think of more things to add there, but why don't we do that? What is the need for a user interview versus a validation interview? How to reduce bias? These things that I could probably learn online, but I really wanted formal education to holistically tie my skills together. So a master's program for me was incredibly important. And the other thing that I really liked that CMU offered was especially it's a techno managerial degree. So it enables people that come from technical backgrounds to transition to something with more soft skills like a product space. So I needed that transition and I needed it in a way where it was relevant to the industry currently. And Carnegie Mellon, especially being in Silicon Valley, was exactly the perfect fit for what I was looking for. So it just seemed a no brainer that I would do this for 16 months and have that ground level knowledge and then jump into being a PM. I felt like that would prepare me in the best way possible rather than make an internal transition. But that was just my preference.
Got you. Got you. Yeah, like regarding to the educational program, we
Yeah.
we also saw a lot of people coming from the MBA background and then like trying to get into consulting and also get into PM. So how do you think about the differences between the MBA programs and this like kind of like master program? Because there is a very real amount of like PM program, but we see like rising trending of like more and more school is trying to have a PM minor, even though in the undergrad. So
Right.
do you have some research on that?
Yeah, I think the larger umbrella that you were asking was, do you recommend that people take a product management master's program or just like the program in general? So I would honestly say if you're doing your research, a master's program, bachelor's program, or whatever product program wouldn't disappoint you. If you do your research and you come to that program and you're disappointed and there's a mismatch with what you expected, it's probably because you haven't done the necessary research to understand what that program was offering. What I mean by that is you really need to understand why you want to do this in the first place. I know that's hard to figure out when there's a lot of ambiguity when you're figuring things out. But talk to people, understand what you're looking for, and see what this program specifically offers. MBA programs offer something different. Shorter programs like CMU's, Carnegie Mellon's, software management program offers something completely different because we are a 16-month program with an internship component. So that's like almost just a year of learning. So it's super tightly packed. It's very specifically focused. So that's different. MBA is a little bit more holistic in terms of the different verticals it covers. Each program has its own differences that it offers, and you should really be sure about what you're looking for. That's basically what I would have to say. Yeah. For me,
Yeah.
for example, I knew that I needed some skill sets that I didn't have. And I wanted to understand that in a more holistic way, which is why I did this master's versus an MBA, because I knew product management was where I wanted to go. And I knew that I knew certain things, but I also didn't know some things. So a smaller program where I could choose my courses and I had a lot of flexibility to choose my courses was perfect fit for me.
Yeah. Interesting, interesting. Yeah,
Not
I
for
think that's that's solve a lot of people's question because like people are always we know like a lot of people want to get into PM, so people are always asking, should I take a like formal degree to get into this field, or should I do some startup and be a founder and then jump to a large corporate? So, but like basically, like
there
PM
is a right
product
answer.
people come, there are no right answer, and people are
Right.
coming very diverse background.
Yeah.
Yes, and you also mentioned that your program specifically has a summer internship mission in that, and also you did a PM intern at Adobe. So we already know that a lot of people have some delusions for being a PM because like seems like this is a very even though this is an entry level like position, but people saying that we have a manager title. So like how did you think about this delusion and how did you break it? And after you actually having a title of a PM, what really surprised you? What do you think is different?
Right. That's an interesting question. There's a lot of competence here, so let me try to tackle that. So I did my internship in Salesforce actually. When I was working in Adobe, it was with my practicum team, more of a product management role, which is also very rewarding in its own sense. Now, talking about what kind of delusions do we have as product manager that kind of gets broken when you start working is, I suppose, if you haven't had the chance to practically get hands-on work experience as a product manager, there are certain aspects of product management that's really sensationalized in LinkedIn or in general in articles and stuff where every day is not the same. You're the CEO of a product. Great. But you also have to keep pinging people to tell them
That's so true.
send their requirements to you so that you understand how to, draft this requirements document and send it to the team. So there are very menial everyday tasks too that are overlooked and aren't really talked about if you're only looking at it at a lens where the product space in LinkedIn is sensationalized. So basically that I would say that's something that would be a delusion that you would probably break if you start working as a PM in a large or small, whatever company.
Totally
That's the
agree.
first part of it. What was the second question? Sorry, trying to recall.
Yeah, basically, how did you like rate this delusion, and what is the difference after you actually becoming a PM? Because like you
Yeah.
were basically doing some volunteering job when
Yeah.
you were an engineer, but actually you get title. Like, do you have a great shift on the sense of the ownership, or do you
Right.
have more like leadership perspective input? So, what is the difference when you do the exploration and do the actual job?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, great question. I guess one thing that I've recognized when I've come into the industry regarding product management, not just the day-to-day work, but in general, one thing that I've recognized is there is a certain amount of luck involved with the kind of work you get as a PM. Depending on the team you work with, the scope of the work that you're exposed to also drastically changes. My experience in Salesforce might not be the same experience that some of my peers that worked might have gotten. I had an amazing time because I was given a project with honestly no scope on. I had to create the scope for myself and figure out what I wanted to work in those 3 months and what I wanted to deliver in those 3 months. And it was something that the team has used. And I came back and I started working on it when I started my full time. So it was relevant work. So I had the chance to really apply things that I was learning the other semesters in college. So I had a great time. But I know a couple of my friends in my program that work on maybe creating a small part of an app's feature change. So it's extremely small. the work that they were doing in terms of the impact that it would have on the product that they were working on. So the scope of what you work on changes from team to team. I guess that's something that we're disillusioned by because when we think about product management and we learn about it, we think about it on a larger lens. We think about, okay, let's talk about road mapping. Let's talk about, a product vision. All of that is very high level. When you're talking about
Yes.
BPM in a team, you're going to be thinking about much more granular
Yes.
components that you'll be working with day to day.
Yeah, totally agree. Large
Yeah.
things always start from small.
Right.
So yeah, especially junior people, I feel like it's really important to really willing to get our hand dirty and deal with a very, very small teeny task. Um,
Right. Exactly. And that's there it's so rewarding in its own way. Working on a small component, you start working on other components of your skill set, like reaching out to people, stakeholder management, understanding expectations, conducting user interviews without any bias in the questions. There are so many things that you learn while doing tasks that seem small in terms of scope, but for you, it's always a learning curve because you probably haven't done that before. And that prepares you to take on larger tasks and eventually be a PM for an entire team, for example. But that's not the organic transition that you would anticipate to have when you're going into the workspace. So that's, I think, is something that there's a gap there, which is what doesn't prepare students when they're going into the workforce.
Yeah, I totally agree. Because when we are interviewing with a large company, we always give a product proposal, which is talking about the high level business goal and as well as a product strategy, as well as a 5 years plan. But when we actually got into the work, is always even a lot of times we got some like little projects, even though just redesign a button or kind of like do some very like revamping internal tools. So yeah, I'm pretty much resilient to that. Okay, let's take a shots left turn on our topic. Is basically kind of like you have an engineering background. So, do you think engineering background give you a superpower in your day to day work, or do you think like because like a lot of people are asking that I don't have a computer science degree, am I eligible to be a PM? So, like you were is an engineer. So, do you think it's really help you to manage the work or like conduct your product strategy?
Yeah, again, good question. I would say that being an engineer or coming from an engineering background is not as important as it's perceived to be. But I will admit where I do think it makes a difference is when you're having conversations with your engineering counterparts, having some context definitely helps you gain trust quickly because they understand, okay, they know what I'm talking about. They can keep up. Okay, this is what I'm working on. So the trust is quicker to build and you can create a rapport with your team very quickly during sprint planning or while creating user stories, at least based on my experience so far. But that being said, I think as a product manager, you kind of live a lot of times in ambiguity. So you very quickly become comfortable with being in that space. So you will learn what you need to and how much you need to in order to get the task done. So learning those technical aspects is something that you can learn on the go. And your engineering team will be the focal point of helping you make that transition. Let's say you have no technical background, you can ask them, "Hey, can you explain it to me like I'm 5? I don't get what's happening here." And they'll do it for you. So wonderful. My engineering team are working on something that I absolutely have no idea on, even though I have my previous life as an engineer. But these been wonderful, but it helped me grasp basic concepts like, how like they talked about the change management systems like Perforce. I've worked on it. I've checked in code using that. So I understand the context of the tools they're talking about, but even if I didn't, they would explain it to me, so it's totally fine. It's not as necessary as people think it is.
Yeah, that's huge. Always doesn't hurt to ask more question, especially like to your stakeholders, for your teachers. But I actually got a really like interesting follow up question. Is there is always a fine line between being a product manager or being a technical program manager? Because like I also have some technical background, so we always will have some tendency that thinking the product from a technical perspective, from the visible perspective, but that actually sometimes conflicts with the consumer perspective. And how do you find the fine line between getting too much involved in the technical work or just like doing some like fine product planning without thinking feasibility? Because I see some product manager, they even though go through the implementation plan with the engineer, talking about the APIs, back end, front end, and very detailed things. So how do you think this works? Where is the balance?
Sure. That's a good question. And I think that's something that also, again, depends case by case basis. I think some product managers like being a little bit more hands on. And I'll tell you the reason for that as well. When I have a technical understanding about the product to a deeper level, what I'm basically functioning as in a company is I am shielding my engineering team and I'm having conversations with stakeholders, with customers, internally with the upper management to let them know that, hey, my team is going to be able to deliver this. This is what they can do. This is what they can't. And when I have an understanding about what our requirements are, what a certain task would look like in order to, or for our team to implement it, I can be more confident in having these conversations. When a customer comes and asks me something, I will know if that's feasible within the environment of the way our product functions today. So I think some PMs enjoy having that core understanding so that they can have more confident conversations. And there are some PMs that are comfortable with knowing the high level picture so that they can communicate with the customers and say, let me get back to you if they don't know something. So I think it depends case by case on what you're more comfortable with functioning as. But with that being said, I do think it's important to understand the distinction about what level of technical involvement you should have as a PM. Just because think about it this way, the more that I ask my engineering team about technical questions or keep bothering them about these questions, the less time they have to do
Yes.
the work that we're
Yes.
telling them to do. So, and also, it also creates an environment where it feels like there's a lack of trust.
Yes.
So, with those both in mind, there's a fine line in which the PM should probably understand when to say, okay, I have enough information. Thank you. But I think that's something that we'll probably hone as we keep going. I don't know if I have that understanding yet. Maybe I'll slowly gain it. But yeah, that's a good question. I think it's something that you only know with time. And there is definitely a healthy amount of distinction that needs to be maintained.
Yes, that's also something I'm also personally trying to learn on the way because, like, you never know. And also, it's pretty like case by case because, like, some engineering team, they're pretty much they need you to get them through the way to, to pretty much put an eye on the whole execution level and the journey. But like some teams, they're kind of like they can autopilot. So you should
Right.
just deliberate the product feature page and let them to execute.
Yeah.
Yes.
I actually have a follow-up thing that I did when I just recently joined Salesforce is you can actually have one-on-one interviews with your engineering team. And when you're talking to them, one of the questions that you can ask them is, what is your working style? What I mean by that is, do they prefer being left alone and not being asked too many questions? Or are they comfortable with any question that I have, anything that I can think about? Can I come to them and ask them those questions? These are things that you can clarify as well so that you understand how to work with your engineering team because they shouldn't feel like they're being questioned or interviewed. So, having that first initial one on one conversation with them, maybe setting that context to understand what they prefer would also enable the PM to know how to set those boundaries.
Yes. It's very important. I think this topic should be added to the onboarding sessions.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. Yeah. That would definitely be useful.
Yes. Because that's what lay out of like solid trust the foundation for the ongoing work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Okay. Okay. Yeah, let's take a shift on our topic. I think we already have enough interesting information on your personal career trajectory. And also, I know that you are very personally into the workplace diversity and inclusivity. So let's jump into this topic. So first of all, it's kind of like a really rare and precious to say like someone was really like have the passion on this field because people are always focused on the most trending technology like AI, like Web3 previously is a metaverse. So when I was like talking with you previously, you were talking that you are very into the diversity and accessible design. So can you articulate little bit more like what is the workplace diversity and inclusivity and why is important to you and to the public?
Yeah, no, so much to tell, but I'll try to keep it short. Yes. I'm definitely, like you said, an advocate of diversity and inclusivity in the workplace. And when I see that, the reason why I think it's important is having a diverse workforce brings in a variety of perspectives and ideas. It just leads to more creative solutions, especially in the product space. Having people that come from different backgrounds and different experiences, when they all come together and bring with them their unique viewpoints, it just helps the company become better, which is why I think workplace diversity is so important. For example, right now with Salesforce, I feel like my differences are both valued and respected. Sounds like a plug for Salesforce. It's just my experience so far. For example, the fact that I'm new to the team and I'm somebody that just joined the product space, it's not seen as detrimental. In fact, it's almost encouraged for me to tap into that part. Since I am new, they asked me to really think about that fresh perspective I'm bringing in. And the fact that I'm new, I'd probably see so many processes differences that I don't understand. And I can call them out on it and say, why are you guys doing this the way you're doing it? I genuinely asked a question like this to one of the PMs. I said, why are we doing this way? And sometimes they just do it that way because they've always done it that way. So it's always useful to question it to see if we can revisit or change the way that we're doing things. So it's always it's always good to have inclusivity and just a diverse work environment. Yeah, that's that's basically the crux of why I think it's important. And you were mentioning why I like accessible design and whether I could tell you more about it, right? Was that a part of your
Yeah.
question? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So to again clarify, accessible design is another word for inclusive design. It's basically just designing products or creating environments that can be used by people with a wide range of abilities or disabilities. So the intent here is that we're trying to include people that come from different walks of life and we're creating a product so it will work well for them. So a reason why I think as a PM, it's so important for us to think about accessible design is and to have that mindset is because there's a lot of benefits in thinking in that manner. It just, for example, I think products that are designed with accessibility in mind just have a better user experience because it allows you to organically think about something called context based design. I'll tell you a little bit more about that with an example. For example, audiobooks that are very prevalent today they were originally intended for people with visual impairments. For example, in 1930, AFP, which is the American Foundation for Blind, they saw potential in providing access to literature for people through audiobooks because they probably, they can listen to books that they can't read. But now today, it's become an important tool that's used by a much wider audience because let's say someone's driving or someone's running and they don't have their usual means of accessing or reading a book. Now they use audiobooks to do that. So what we're saying is when we're thinking about inclusive design, we're now thinking about context-based design choices. So if a person's running, they can no longer view the book, so they can listen to the audiobook. But I wouldn't have thought about this initially when I'm thinking about how to provide a tool for users to read. So thinking about inclusivity in design allows you to just have a better product that works in so many different contexts. So I actually do talk about this a little bit more in detail in my newsletter because this is something that I'm really excited about. And I'm in the process of building up that environment. I'll let you know. But yeah, if anyone's interested, definitely take a look at that.
Yeah, definitely check out. So I'm very agree with this topic is basically when we are trying to because we are thinking about the product features and the solutions, especially in the large corporate, there is so much edge cases. So you have to cover a lot of different user cases, especially given that the disabled people as well as the accessible design we are talking about is basically a very minority of the user group. But when you're actually looking into this group and figure out probably have a specific feature for this and cover this like very probably we can see them like power users. And finally we find that this feature become like broader and broader accessible to the whole user pool. So I think that's a is a kind of like a shortcut for
Yeah.
PMs to have a great and unique and creative features.
No, yeah, I agree. I agree. I think it definitely gives them a perspective to think about those edge cases that they otherwise would not.
Yes. Okay, so thank you. We are going to ramp up our this episode, but before we ramp up, we want to ask two routine questions. So the first one is, do you have any recommendation on the blogs or podcasts or blogs you are recently looking into, or you feel figure out this very helpful for you?
Yeah, I read a lot of books, so there's so many recommendations, but I'm going to keep it to the one that I'm reading right now that I think is very important for anybody to read, not just PMs, is Tim Ferriss has a book called Tool of Titans that I think is just awesome. It's not meant to be read as a book. It's just nuggets of wisdom. Open any page and you'll be able to glean some information. You can go back, think about it a little bit more, come back, read it. So it's just a great book. Newsletters that I read are every day at least is Julie Zhu, I think that's how we pronounce her name. Into the Looking Glass is the newsletter, and it's really good. And there's something called Bringing the Donuts by Kevin. He's really good too. The reason why I suggest these newsletters is because they're not just informative, they're also very enjoyable when you're consuming them. So you won't just stop reading it one week and then a month later you read the next version. So I would recommend those.
Gotcha. No worries. If audience you didn't take the note, we will follow up with a
Yeah.
newsletter
Yeah.
of our this episode's podcast. So yeah, next question is last question. So would you mind sharing your model? Basically saying something you believe deeply in your life.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, yeah, I have some principles that I live by my entire life. Like, for example, be kind is something that
Mhm.
it's always useful. It's a motto that I live by. But there are some that I adopt from time to time. And there's one that resonates with me most recently is anything worth doing is worth doing imperfectly. What I mean by that is, for example, let's say you wanted to take a bath today, but you were very tired. At least wash your face. You wanted to work out today, but you don't have 40 minutes. Squeeze in a 10-minute workout. So basically, anything worth doing is worth doing it perfectly. And as a PM, I think since we live in ambiguity so much, when there's a task or a scope that seems so ambiguous, you don't know where to start. And the analysis paralysis is very real. So you can definitely think about it in terms of, okay, all I need to do is just have the first draft. That's very crappy. It's totally okay. I'll iterate over it and make it better. So this perspective really helps me because I'm a new PM with large scope that I'm trying to just swim through. So this helps me bite down chunks and just get to the middle of it, to the core of it. So yeah,
Gotcha. That's very inspiring. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you,
sure.
Pranathi.
No, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast, Ellie. This is awesome. I love product CMU and everybody should follow.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
So this episode of The Breakdown, a huge shout out to our speaker Pranathi, host Tilly, and editor Kevin. You can find the list of resources we talked about in the description below. And if you're eager to continue breaking down barriers and engage with like-minded individuals, we invite you to subscribe to our newsletter, where you can drill down deeper into topics of our podcast and tune in, as well as tech news summaries and trending product analysis as Sink In and Delve In. Thank you for joining us for today's breakdown, and see you in the next episode.